you were a supporter of Bernie Sanders. We're going
for 2016.
For 2016,
yes.
yeah, we're going into another presidential election. I'm fascinated by the number of people that I've been connected to, close with, for 30 years that I would say were some of my teachers in my own awakening.
Yes,
that have completely given up on voting. And I feel really troubled by that.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like, and in many of their cases, it's a political stand.
Yeah, it is a political stand, whether it's realized or not. It's
right.
A political stand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel concerned about that. So I'm curious if you were to invite someone who is consciously taking a political stand not to vote. If you were to invite them to reconsider that position, what would you say?
Well, to me, the framing of that question, I don't believe that Donald Trump is in office because of motherfuckers who did not vote. We all know that Hillary won the popular vote.
Right.
And we also know who pushes the Democratic vote and who has always pushed I'm talking about black women and the black community and what have you. My problem is the motherfuckers who did vote, that 53% of white women, I'm trying to find a way to get those motherfuckers not to vote. Actually,
I'm taking a different. I totally get it. I'm taking a different approach.
I'm like, no, just stay home and wash your flag. Your flag is dirty and that's not patriotic. The new patriotism is you should hand wash your flag on voting day. And don't vote or use your flag to wash your car because your car will now glisten with American
pride.
Whatever. I'm trying to get those cats not to vote. It's my own gerrymandering. I'm trying to convince.
Okay, well, I wish you the best of luck on that strategy. In the meantime, in response to that, I actually have a project that's pretty quiet, but it's called Normal White People. And
what is that?
It's basically it was basically in response to the statistics. Well, so there are a couple premises. So one premise is that actually there are white folks out there that, because I think part of the narrative right now is really trying to create this as a binary. And that in an effort to turn this into a binary, you can actually perpetuate that narrative.
Right.
And so part of the body of work is to say, actually, there really are white folks out there that also want to contribute to the awakening of humanity. And what I noticed about myself was that I was sort of hiding out in communities because I didn't want to deal with white people.
Right.
And that particularly in the last presidential cycle, it became statistically explicitly clear, if it had not been before, that was completely reckless and irresponsible on my part.
So what you're saying is that forward-thinking white people need to actually spend their time and money evangelizing in the white community.
Yeah,
and get the fuck out of Africa and South America.
Yeah, and actually that that what I realized about my own self was that my own unhealed stuff with the white community for having, I was always too big. I was always too loud. There were all kinds of things that didn't work for me where I grew up.
So you felt more acceptance elsewhere?
Yeah, I had a context for beauty when I found the Chicago hip hop community that had never existed for me previously.
Right.
But what I have had to do is really untangle all of that stuff for myself.
Yeah, because you're not here to escape.
Exactly.
You also, it's your business to confront.
Yeah, and if I just write off that 53%, right, I'm not confident that that's going to be an effective strategy. So now I'm like, okay, I have to work with these folks. And I have to see them as the presence of God itself. And see that that is me. Where does Donald Trump live in me? And then I gotta work with people because someone worked with me. So that's just one.
It's true. It's true. We need to see that. Because Black Americans been working with white people for a long time and trying to, aid in the process and what have you. And it's true that has to be done. And if we cannot count on, because, we could solve this, we could nip this in the bud if we just taught proper history, the people's history in elementary, junior high schools, and high schools. Like if we change our educational curriculum and just taught, we spend you spend your first year just studying indigenous studies, all about the histories of, the Americas before, any Europeans arrived here, and find out where you are, what state, the names in your state that correspond with the people that were there, this type of shit, all the shit that we don't know.
That's right.
But it's always coming out of, I'm from Wyoming, like all this shit. And we never correlate like the truth and the history and the peoples of that land, like even just in Canada, any public forum in Canada today, you first have to acknowledge the rightful owners and protectors of the land where you're standing in whatever city, in whatever building, in whatever venue, in whatever bank, in whatever. You have to acknowledge that before you say whatever else. You want to make a speech.
Wow.
That's just in Canada. Like we wouldn't have to travel far to find different ways of different models of how to do shit. That's the law in Canada. You have to first acknowledge, we are on, this land, first giving honor to them and da-da-da. Now.
Right.
Yeah. And so we replace that with the shit, the easier shit, giving honor to God, who my root and my salvation. That's what I'm saying. It's like, no, you want to honor God? Honor the people who stood on this land before you ever stood here. That's how you honor God. That's the thing that I would love to see happen. It's if we could affect, that's really everything. If we could change our educational system, if we can change our educational system and teach true indigenous history, true history of the enslaved Africans that came and take out the supremacist notion and stop talking in terms of the greatness that, Europeans brought. Let's talk about diseases. Let's talk about, the germ traveled faster than the bullet, right? Like one of the things we never really talk about is that when the time between, the first colonialists or pioneers not pioneers, but explorers arriving on the North American continent, and then the arrival of the Pilgrims, there's 100 years between that time. There's 100 years between that. So you have people that arrived, said, holy shit, this is here, left, and then 100 years later is when the Pilgrims arrive. And between that time frame, when the Pilgrims arrived, they're like, we had writings that said that there were hundreds and thousands of people here. Where are they? The germs from that first arrival over the course of 100 years may have already killed like 75% of the population. So that people are arriving in places that seem like, oh, this was a village, or why is it empty? You know what I'm saying? There's a whole history that we're not even fucking taught.
Yes.
We need to know this.
Yes.
Then we can fucking celebrate American history. Then we can have some fucking pride in the right thing.
Yeah.
In the right thing.
Yeah.
Building up to, okay, now then they decided they wanted to leave England and not be a part of that. Okay. But there's a bunch of shit before that.
Well, I think what's also interesting about your perspective is I heard you say recently, like, America was originally like a fresh idea.
Yeah.
And so I think that the point is...
Well, wait, let's be clear, because I don't want to oversimplify it. There could be something fresh in people arriving someplace, acknowledging the people that were there and the people being welcoming and saying, yes, you're welcome to be here, participate in what we're doing and blah, 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 So there's nothing fresh in genocide.
Of course.
Except for the blood.
Yes. But I think sometimes people create this divide, like, oh, so all you want to do is now go back over the last 400 years with history. It's like, all of this can be true. All of this can coexist. We can acknowledge what actually happened here.
This is how we build greatness.
That's exactly right.
It's through acknowledging what actually happened that we're able to create models that sustain.
That's right.
Like we're talking about all this environmental shit. Like that's the new thing. Like, okay, Greta Thunberg is here and all that. What the fuck do you think the indigenous community has been saying from the jump? Mm-hmm. Thank you for finally deciding to listen to the motherfuckers that were telling you this from the jump. Mm-hmm. Don't act like you invented this shit. You invented waste.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's it.